Hello, I'm Bakhtiar Sonova and you're watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. United States says it shot down Iranian drone flying towards its aircraft carrier. A second round of trilateral talks on the Russia-Ukraine war started in the UAE capital Abu Dhabi. And thousands of Epstein documents taken down after victims identified. U.S. President Donald Trump says the United States is negotiating with Iran on a new nuclear deal. The confirmation comes after an Iranian drone was shot down near the Abraham Lincoln carrier and threats to a U.S.-flagged tanker. It's ahead of Friday's talks, which will now be held in Oman and not Turkey, as first agreed.
U.S. President Donald Trump said that the United States is currently negotiating with Iran. The announcement came after Tehran requested that planned talks be held in Oman rather than Turkey.
Are the negotiations from Iran?
Roll over, but they are negotiating. They'd like to do something, and we'll see if something is going to be done. They had a chance to do something a while ago, and it didn't work out, and we did Midnight Hammer. I don't think they want that happening again, but they would like to negotiate. We are negotiating with them right now, yes.
Mr. President, where will the meeting be? It seems like
I
it's
can't tell
changing.
you that. Mr. President, there's more than one meeting. Yeah, please.
Earlier on Tuesday, the U.S. military said it shot down an Iranian Shahed 139 drone approaching the Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier in the Arabian Sea. Navy Captain Tim Hawkins said the drone was destroyed by an F-35 fighter jet in self-defense, with no American personnel or equipment harmed. In a separate incident in the Strait of Hormuz, Iran's Revolutionary Guard harassed a U.S.-flagged merchant vessel, but authorities say the situation was defused with the escort of a U.S. Navy ship. Meanwhile, U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff visited Israel to discuss nuclear talks with Iran and the next phase of the Gaza ceasefire plan ahead of Friday's planned meeting with Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. Saudi and Egyptian officials are also expected to attend. Trump linked the diplomatic efforts to the U.S. military presence in the area, warning, "We have ships heading to Iran. If we can work something out, that would be great, and if we can't, probably bad things would happen." Iranian officials insist that sanctions relief must be part of any deal. Regional mediators, including Turkey, have urged de-escalation. Experts say Friday's talks could provide a crucial opportunity to ease tensions between Washington and Tehran.
A second round of trilateral talks on the Russia-Ukraine war has begun in the UAE capital Abu Dhabi. Ukraine's chief negotiator Rustem Umerov says discussions opened in a trilateral format involving Ukraine, Russia and the United States. He noted that talks will continue in separate working groups focused on specific issues before a joint synchronization of positions. Umerov said negotiations are taking place under direct instructions from President Volodymyr Zelensky, and the Ukrainian delegation is briefing the president at every stage of the process. The talks follow an initial round of consultations held in Abu Dhabi in late January, also with U.S. participation. Washington's delegation includes the U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, who arrived in Abu Dhabi earlier today. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov says Russian troops will continue fighting in Ukraine until Kiev makes decisions that could bring the war to an end. He said Moscow's position remains unchanged and is known to both Ukrainian and U.S. negotiators. The comments came as a new round of peace talks began in Abu Dhabi.
Russia continues its special military operation. The door to a peaceful settlement is open. Russia maintains its openness. Our position is crystal clear, well understood by both the Kiev regime and the American negotiators, who are providing their good services in conducting these trilateral negotiations, and to whom we are grateful for their efforts. But until the Kiev regime makes the appropriate decisions, the special military operation continues. Our troops are striking targets they believe are associated with the Kiev regime's military complex, and the operation continues.
киевского режима, и операция продолжается.
Russia launched its most power attack this year on Ukraine's battered energy facilities, killing 2 people, Kiev said. Ukraine's president said the strikes violated Russia's agreement with Donald Trump to hold off from attacking its energy systems in the depth of a freezing winter.
At least 2 people have been killed as Russia launched its largest air attack of the year on Ukraine's energy infrastructure overnight, according to authorities. President Volodymyr Zelensky says there were a record number of ballistic missiles and drones that were fired. Power plants and critical infrastructure in Kyiv and several other regions were hit as temperatures fell to -20 degrees Celsius. Ukraine's largest private energy company, DTEK, described the assault as the most powerful blow to the energy sector this year. More than 1,000 apartment buildings in the capital were left without heating, while a thermal power plant in the eastern city of Kharkiv was damaged beyond repair. There was no immediate comment from Moscow. President Zelensky accused Russia of choosing escalation over diplomacy, saying Moscow had used a brief pause in attacks to stockpile weapons and prepare for renewed strikes.
The war must be stopped. But if the world, America and Europe do not have the power to stop Russian strikes, then who will believe there is the power to guarantee that the war will not reignite again? Pressure is needed so that Russia has motivation to invest in diplomacy rather than a war of destruction.
NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte, speaking during a visit to Kiev, condemned the attack and urged alliance members to increase air defense support for Ukraine.
And that is an attack, again, on innocent civilians, on civilian infrastructure, which I think is unacceptable. And this has nothing to do with winning a war or fighting a war, which, as I said, in itself was unprovoked, starting on the 24th of February 2022. But this is creating chaos.
The attack comes days after a US-backed energy ceasefire expired and comes ahead of another round of US-coordinated talks between Ukrainian and Russian negotiators in Abu Dhabi later this week.
Thousands of documents related to the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein have been removed from the U.S. Department of Justice's website. It's after victims and their lawyers warned that sensitive personal details had been made public. They said that the disclosure placed dozens of survivors at risk and was causing distress.
The U.S. Department of Justice says it's taken down all flagged documents after victims said their identities had been compromised in the release of the Epstein files. Thousands of documents have been removed from its website. Lawyers for the victims of the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein said email addresses and nude images were included, which could allow some victims to be identified. They say it's disrupted the lives of nearly 100 survivors. In a statement, they described the disclosure as outrageous and said they should not be named, scrutinized, or re-traumatized. The Justice Department said it blames technical or human error and added that it is reviewing further requests and checking whether more documents need redaction. Asked about transparency, US President Donald Trump said some victims were unhappy with the released material and argued that the country should move on to other issues.
Do you think that they should be more transparent?
The fact that they thought they released too much. You know, I heard that, and you tell me something else. No, I think it's really time for the country to get onto something else. Really, you know, now that nothing came out about me, other than it was a conspiracy against me, literally by Epstein and other people. But I think it's time now for the country to maybe get onto something else.
What would you say to people
like
who feel like they haven't gotten
healthcare,
justice, Mr. President?
something that people care about.
Millions of Epstein-related files have been released since a law mandated their disclosure last year, including millions of pages, images, and videos published on Friday. The release came 6 weeks after the Justice Department missed a legal deadline set by a law signed by President Trump, following bipartisan pressure in Congress.
The ex-Prince of the UK, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, has reportedly been relocated from his Windsor home. The move comes amid renewed scrutiny over his ties to Jeffrey Epstein.
Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the brother of King Charles, has reportedly moved out of Royal Lodge in Windsor following damaging new revelations about his links to Jeffrey Epstein. British media say Andrew left the Soterroom mansion, where he has lived for more than 20 years, and has been relocated to a cottage on the King's Sandringham estate in Norfolk. It had also emerged that ex-prince was paying what is known as a peppercorn rent at Royal Lodge, a legal term meaning the rent is only nominal, often as little as £1 a year, in order to keep a lease technically valid. The move comes as police assess a claim that a woman was sent by Epstein to Andrew at Royal Lodge in 2010. A Thames Valley police spokesperson said officers are aware of reports that a woman may have been taken to an address in Windsor that year as part of human trafficking. Police have not announced any formal investigation, saying the information is being assessed. Andrew has not commented on the latest allegation, but has previously denied any wrongdoing related to Epstein. In previous statements, Buckingham Palace has said the King's sympathy is with victims of abuse. Andrew stepped back from public duties in 2019 after his friendship with Epstein became the focus of intense public attention. The latest claim is now being reviewed by police. Zainab Farizadeh, A-News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
U.S. President Donald Trump signed a major funding bill on Tuesday, ending a partial government shutdown that began on Saturday. The package was approved by the Senate on Friday and later passed by the House of Representatives. The legislation will fund most of U.S. government departments until the end of the financial year on September 30th, including defense, education, healthcare, labor, transport, and housing. Funding for the Department of Homeland Security, however, has been extended only until 13th of February. Last year's shutdown lasted 43 days, furloughing hundreds of thousands of workers and costing the U.S. economy about $11 billion. The U.S. brokered ceasefire is taking effect in northeastern Syria. Syrian government forces have now moved into the Kurdish-controlled cities of Hasaka and Qamishli under the agreement.
Syrian government security forces have entered the northeastern Kurdish-controlled cities of Hasaka and Qamishli, implementing the first phase of a U.S. brokered ceasefire agreement. The deployment comes after weeks of conflict in which the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, the SDF, lost large areas of territory to Damascus. A convoy of military trucks entered Hasaka on Monday and then in Qamishli on Tuesday as the SDF imposed temporary curfews. The agreement, announced last Friday, aims to integrate Kurdish fighters into Syria's national army and police while bringing civilian institutions under central government control. Under the terms of the deal, government forces are to avoid Kurdish-majority neighborhoods. Those small interior ministry units will take over state facilities such as civil registries, passport offices and airports. Kurdish local police will continue security operations in both cities before gradually merging with government forces. US officials have praised the agreement as an historic step toward national unity and reconciliation after more than 14 years of civil war. The SDF, once a key US ally against Islamic State, has seen its influence wane as Damascus reasserts control over Syria's northeast.
Who will be chosen to lead the United Nations next? The race for the Secretary General's position has formally begun.
The United Nations is set to choose a new Secretary General later this year, with the 5-year term beginning on January 1st, 2027, as Antonio Guterres prepares to step down. Although the role traditionally rotates among regions, diplomats say Latin America is widely seen as next in line, even as candidates from other regions remain possible. The selection process formally began in November 2025, when the presidents of the Security Council and General Assembly invited member states to submit nominations. Governments have until April 1st to put forward candidates, who will then take part in public interactive dialogues later that month to present their vision for the UN. 3 Latin American figures have so far emerged as leading contenders: former Chilean president and ex-UN human rights chief Michelle Bachelet, Rafael Grossi of Argentina, currently head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, and Costa Rica's Rebecca Greenspan, the Secretary General of the UN Conference on Trade and Development. The Security Council will narrow the field through a series of closed-door straw polls, a process that requires the backing of all 5 permanent members: the United States, Russia, China, Britain and France. The General Assembly then votes on the final candidate, a step typically seen as a formality. Often described as part diplomat, part administrator, the UN Secretary-General oversees thousands of staff, multi-billion-dollar budgets and peacekeeping missions around the world. While the position carries limited formal power, the Secretary-General remains the UN's most influential global voice during times of crisis.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss the latest developments in Ukraine, Russia, US peace talks. Stay tuned. Welcome back to A News. Ukraine, Russia and the United States are beginning second round of United States brokered trilateral peace talks in Abu Dhabi, aimed at finding a path to end nearly 4 years of war. The talks hosted in the United Arab Emirates capital follow an earlier round of negotiations in late January that brought diplomats from all 3 countries together, the first such trilateral engagement in years. But the road to peace remains rocky. Territorial disputes over eastern Ukraine, particularly the Donbas region, and unresolved security guarantees stand as key obstacles. As negotiations unfold under the shadow of ongoing conflict, we'll look at both the political and military dimensions shaping the search for peace. Now, joining us from Lisbon is Lieutenant General Marco Sironia to help unpack where these talks stand and what they might mean for the future of the war. Lieutenant General, welcome to the program and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me today.
So, General Sironia, how significant is it that Ukraine, Russia and the United States are now engaging in trilateral format rather than bilateral or indirect negotiations?
So I suppose that it will be a good step because it's the first round was not easy to come to something substantially that we can see that there are any progress. But nevertheless, it's always good, at least in diplomatic terms, that the negotiation didn't stop. So that's the main points that are in the agenda are the same, I suppose. It's the issue of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. It's the issue of territories, the exchange, and the other one is the security guarantees to Ukraine or to the peace process or to the ceasefire. So that will be the main points. We have Donald Trump is saying that we are in the last mile, but I suppose that will be a long mile. That will need time for the negotiators and the parties to go through. What was the picture from the last round? No agreement about the territories, because Russia still wants to Ukraine to withdraw from the western Donbas. It's something that the Ukrainians don't want. Concerning Zaporizhzhia, could be, let's see if the Americans come with a better proposal that could be agreed by the parts. And concerning the security guarantees, it looks like that are something agreed between Ukraine and the United States, and even the Europeans. But probably the Russians don't agree with all the substance of the security guarantees. So the main points are open. Let's see what's going on. I suppose concerning the territories, the main point is that the solution of a demilitarized zone could be something that the parts could work around that. We know that the Ukrainians want; they are able to withdraw from the western Donbas if the Russians withdraw in the eastern Donbas. So it's a kind of having the ceasefire in the front line, and after have a demilitarized zone, and that could be an initial point to work through a free economic zone. That was the initial proposal of the United States. Let's see if that works, because the Ukrainians have to see something, they have to withdraw from that, and let's see if the Russians are able to withdraw from the eastern part. It will be difficult for sure. And concerning the security guarantees, let's see if the Americans are able to convince the Russians about the solution that they have agreed with Ukraine. But the conversation should be about that for sure.
General Sironia, we have seen intense Russian missile and drone strikes targeting Ukrainian energy infrastructure right before the talks. To what extent do such attacks affect diplomatic negotiations?
It should affect. We have seen the last words of Zelensky, of course. This is a negotiation that's where the Russians always put pressure on the other part, of course. And let's see. Donald Trump tried to have a break in the attacks to the infrastructure, energy infrastructure, and that he was able to convince the Russians to do that. Nevertheless, we have some difference between the timelines of this kind of ceasefire against the energy infrastructures. But the last attack last night, it was very, very, very tough, and so it's something that the Russians use to put pressures in the Ukrainians to break their morale and try to have a solution where the Ukrainians are without leverage in this discussion. And of course, the Zelensky also somehow come out with a guidance to his chief of staff, Sisky, with a guidance to increase the number of deaths of Russians in the fight. So it's not the best picture to reinitiate the negotiations in Abu Dhabi. So, but it's the war. The war works like that. So the military operations in the ground, diplomatic negotiations outside. So let's see how the mood is going to happen. But I suppose that the most important thing. Let's see if the United States are able to come out with the new proposals and try to have some course of actions that are more in line with the red lines of both sides. It's not easy, but the United States also have some leverage in both parts. Let's see what's going to happen.
So how do you assess the risk of the conflict escalating further if the talks fail? Are we closer to a negotiated settlement now than several months ago?
I suppose that in that view we are in the same point. So the probability of the war keep going. It's huge. It's great. I suppose that the conditions to have a ceasefire now are not met. So it's most probably the war will go on. The good thing here is that most probably the negotiations keep going on also with several rounds, and try to figure out if there are any room, because one of the things that we know is that this war of attrition is provoking a huge erosion in degrading the both parts. So let's see if in a couple of months, 2 or 3 months, the parts are more keen to accept some changes in their red line, so to speak. Of course, the Ukrainians are hoping that the Russians could accept some of the proposals put in the table concerning several things that are inside the red lines of the Russians, and the Russians are thinking the same thing, trying to erode the capacities and the capabilities of the Ukrainian armed forces in the ground, and trying to have a solution in a couple of months that could be better for the Russians. Let's see what's going to happen, but I suppose that the war will go on for the next months ahead.
General Sironia, thank you for your valuable insights and for helping our audience better understand the complex balance between diplomacy and battlefield realities as the talks continue in Abu Dhabi. We appreciate your time and expertise. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Now, after the break, we'll take a look at the major stories from the region. Welcome back to News Now. Let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. Armenia's Justice Minister Serbuhi Galyan says the text of the country's new constitution will be ready within the next 6 months, according to Armenian media. She said the final stage of the work is still scheduled for March and that the timeline will not be revised. Galyan stressed that by then the full draft will be completed and made public. She added that finalizing the new constitution remains one of the ministry's top priorities in Armenia. Georgia's ruling party has pushed through one of its most far-reaching legislative initiatives to date, a package of laws that reshapes the rules on grants, political activity, and foreign funding. Supporters call it a matter of sovereignty. Critics warn it marks a decisive turn away from democracy. Our correspondent reports from Tbilisi.
With 82 votes in favor and just 10 against, Georgia's parliament has taken a decisive step towards tightening state control over politics, funding and civic space. In a first reading, lawmakers approved a sweeping legislative package introduced by the ruling Georgian Dream faction. The changes span multiple laws, including the law on grants, the criminal code, election and party financing regulations, and introduce new restrictions, prohibitions, and criminal sanctions. At the core of the package is a redefinition of what constitutes a grant. Under the amendments, virtually any financial or in-kind support, including expertise, services, or technical assistance that could influence political or public processes, would require prior government approval. Receiving such funding without consent could result in heavy fines, community service, or even prison sentences of up to 6 years. Political parties and their leaders face criminal liability for accepting foreign funding. External lobbying is also criminalized. New rules restrict party membership for individuals employed by organizations receiving significant foreign income, while the State Audit Office gains expanded oversight powers. The ruling party says the goal is to protect Georgia's sovereignty from foreign influence. However, opponents argue that the laws give the government unprecedented leverage over civil society, political opponents, media, and activists. The reaction from Brussels has been sharp. I cannot support a government that acts against its own people, said EU Commissioner for Enlargement, Marta Kos, warning that Georgia is moving farther away from its European future and calling on the government to stop this absurdity. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas said that the bloc expects to take steps in response, stressing that freedom of the press and fundamental rights are at stake. Inside Georgia, demonstrators, opposition parties and civil society groups say that the legislation brings the country closer than ever to autocracy and farther from the European path endorsed by voters. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A-News.
In Abu Dhabi, world leaders and humanitarian experts gathered for the third International Zayed Award for Human Fraternity Majlis. The gathering highlighted efforts to foster peace, understanding and cooperation across the world.
The third International Zayed Award for Human Fraternity Majlis took place at the newly inaugurated Zayed National Museum in Abu Dhabi on Tuesday. The gathering brought together world leaders, peace builders and humanitarian experts to discuss global challenges and promote coexistence, compassion and solidarity. For the first time, the Majlis was hosted at the Zayed National Museum, a landmark celebrating the life and legacy of the UAE's founding father, the late Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan. Before the panel sessions, Saida Mirziyoyeva, head of the administration of the President of Uzbekistan and member of the Zayed Award Judging Committee, opened the event with remarks on behalf of this year's panel of judges. The first panel, titled Female Leadership at the Heart of Human Fraternity, highlighted the role of women in strengthening social cohesion and humanitarian values. Vice President of the Heydar Aliyev Foundation, Leyla Aliyeva, was among the panellists. Speaking at the session, she said that respect for different cultures, religions and traditions has always been an integral part of life in Azerbaijan. The Zayed Award for Human Fraternity remains an independent initiative celebrating individuals and institutions that champion solidarity, integrity and humanity across borders.
Saudi Arabia is set to build a $2 billion wind farm in Turkey. It's after Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman met in Riyadh to discuss renewable energy projects as well as Syria's reconstruction.
Turkey and Saudi Arabia have signed an investment agreement worth around $2 billion covering solar and wind energy projects in Turkey. Saudi companies will build energy facilities with a total capacity of 5,000 megawatts. In the first phase, 2,000 megawatts of solar power plants will be constructed in the central provinces of Sivas and Karaman. The projects are expected to meet the needs of 2.1 million households. They will be implemented with 50% localization, with construction set to begin in 2027 and completion planned for 2028 to 2029. It's after Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan met Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in Riyadh to discuss Syria's reconstruction, regional cooperation, and the humanitarian situation in Gaza. They also discussed joint projects in electricity, energy storage, and clean hydrogen. Meanwhile, Erdogan affirmed Turkey's support for Syria's stability and called for greater international efforts to address the Gaza crisis. Both countries play a key role in regional and global energy markets and will expand cooperation in oil, petrochemicals, and renewable energy.
Business leaders and government officials from Central Asia and the United States are meeting in Bishkek for the B5+1 Business Forum. The two-day event follows the recent C5+1 Leaders Summit and focuses on expanding trade, investment and economic cooperation between the region and Washington. Our correspondent Fariza Kalimurzina reports from the Kyrgyz capital.
A two-day B5+1 Business Forum has opened in Bishkek with business leaders and government officials from Central Asia and the United States in attendance. The forum is a direct follow-up to the historic C5+1 Leaders Summit and has established itself as a key platform for dialogue between Central Asian and US business communities. Over the next 2 days, participants will assess progress made since the first meeting in Almaty and present roadmaps across priority areas ranging from critical minerals and information technologies to transport, logistics, and agriculture. The United States views Central Asia as a priority region for foreign economic cooperation over the next 3 years. This was stated by the U.S. Special Envoy for South and Central Asia, Sergio Gore, speaking at the P5+1 forum in Bishkek. According to him, the administration of U.S. President Donald Trump intends to recalibrate Washington's approach to the region by strengthening practical engagement through business and investment. Gore noted that one of the largest U.S. commercial delegations ever to visit the region has arrived in Bishkek. He described this as a foundation for expanding trade and economic ties.
I was looking at the list of the U.S. companies that are visiting here, and I think it's fair to say it's one of the largest and most significant commercial delegations to visit this part of the world. So we hope to build upon that over the next months, over the next years. This is just the beginning. Our companies being here opens the door to cooperation between these 5 incredible nations and the United States. And so we hope to follow up. The United States stands behind the American companies to ensure success. So we're very much looking forward to doing that.
Among the priority areas for cooperation, the U.S. envoy highlighted e-commerce, artificial intelligence, critical minerals, agriculture, and transport infrastructure. Sergio Gore arrived in Kyrgyzstan on a 4-day official visit at the invitation of the Bishkek authorities. According to the press secretary of the President of the Kyrgyz Republic, Askat Alagozov, the visit agenda includes a personal meeting with President Sadr Japarov. As for the business forum itself, more than 300 participants from Central Asia and the United States are taking part today. Panel discussions focus on strengthening the business environment in key sectors and encouraging U.S. private investment in Central Asia. The forum will conclude with the signing of a communique. It will outline an updated action plan aimed at attracting investment and integrating Central Asian economies into global markets. And we will continue our coverage of this important regional event over the next 2 days. Fariza Kalimurzina, Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan, for A News.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's Cairo visit and its implications for regional diplomacy. See you shortly. Welcome back to A News. Today, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is visiting Cairo for a high-stakes official visit that carries implications for far beyond bilateral Ankara-Cairo relations. The trip comes against the backdrop of converging regional crises, from the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza and U.S.-Iran tensions to ongoing instability in Libya, Sudan, Somalia, and the wider Horn of Africa, which have intensified the search for diplomatic avenues to manage spiraling instability. Relations between Ankara and Cairo, long strained since 2013, now appear to be entering a more pragmatic phase, with both sides pursuing expanded economic ties and enhanced cooperation on regional issues. Erdogan's program also includes a Turkey-Egypt business forum aimed at boosting trade and investment, while diplomatic engagement on Gaza ceasefire efforts and reconstruction is expected to dominate talks. To help us unpack the significance of this visit and its potential impact on regional diplomacy, we're joined by our guest, former diplomat and political analyst Melih Demirtas, who speaks to us from Ankara, Turkey. Mr. Demirtas, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Mr. Hassan.
So, Mr. Demirtas, what are the key objectives behind President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's visit to Cairo, and why now? In particular, how central is the Gaza conflict to this diplomatic outreach?
Yes, Mr. Hassanov, I think the last sentence you mentioned is the crucial point actually in this visit. The Gaza and now the opening of this Rafah crossing, of course, all these humanitarian expectations we just in Turkey following from maybe since this outbreak of this crisis 2 years ago, we just saw that Egypt has also an important position inside all these regional balances, also crisis atmosphere. We know that there are some internal situation also in Egypt. We know that there are some very tricky situation, very high tensions also, due to the relations, of course, with Israel, both between Turkey and Israel relations, but also Egypt and Israel relations. And just as you asked, why now? Because also our president, I think President Erdogan, wants to show his willingness and also his motivation that must be a change, a real, maybe a sudden change inside this humanitarian atmosphere. First of all, for Gaza, but not also Gaza, also for Syria, as you said, also for the other regions in Africa right now, but also for this high tension in Iran still going on. I think Egypt is, with Turkey and Egypt, they are important players. I think not only in the Middle East or North Africa, but in the balances of Eurasia right now. Think about United States, Russia, and also Chinese policies. Just as the intersection of these policies, I think we see these two important actors, I mean, Turkey and Egypt. And because of this, maybe we should also exceed maybe the old problems, due to this internal situation of our policies, and now much more pragmatic, as you also mentioned, era started maybe with this bilateral visits, because it is not this first visit. I think in this last maybe 2-3 years, we see many important, especially psychological factors behind this positive atmosphere of these two countries.
Mr. Demirtas, Iran remains a critical factor in regional geopolitics. How might Erdogan and el-Sisi align or differ on approaches toward Tehran's regional influence, and particularly amidst ongoing US-Iran tensions?
Yes, this Iran issue is maybe all the foreign policy experts and diplomats in top 3 maybe subjects in their agendas right now. Not only Turkey and Egypt, I think all the regional countries, maybe all these maybe global foreign policy makers and experts. But Turkey and Egypt just in the middle of such crisis because of maybe economic balances, because of these political turmoils. Of course, they did not want any, first of all, intervention from such an important player, which is the United States. We must say that these interventions, just we see 10 years, 20 years ago in different regions of the world, did not bring any hopes to humanitarian calculations, did not bring any hopes to some political or economic advantages, because one side can profit, yes, for 1 year, maybe for 2 years, but after that, as we see, as United States also experts and diplomats see, it not bring any important positive calculations. So I think for the Iranian case, both Turkey's and Egyptians, maybe high politics and high, of course, experts, I mean, in diplomatic level, also in presidential level, they will maybe show their willingness and motivation, first of all, to the United States side, that there must be a diplomatic table. As we just in this last 2-3 days heard from Iranian side, they are ready. They are ready to talk, as Mr. Pezeshkian also said, Mr. Arakci, Foreign Minister, also said, and this talking must be done as soon as possible. The place can differ. Of course, we just want to, maybe it can be take place in Istanbul, Ankara, and Turkey's initiatives or motivation. But the place and this very soon projection is what we are needed for this regional diplomacy, also for this humanitarian immediate solutions, like in the case of Gaza.
Syria has endured more than a decade of war. What role can and should Turkey and Egypt play in pursuing a political solution or stabilization there? Is there common ground on preserving Syrian sovereignty?
If we say like two or three important subjects in this high-level visits, I think you also mentioned in Saudi Arabia,
yes.
First stop, and now in Egypt, in Cairo. Mr. President Erdogan would like maybe to show this, to the world opinion, that Syria is also motivated to show itself that it entered to a new realm. It may be an important neighbor, of course, to Turkey, and to some sense, of course, to Egyptians, economic zone and political zone. And Syria is an independent country. First of all, Egyptian and also Turkish maybe presidents showed maybe with their talks that the new administration, after all these years of maybe crisis and turmoil years of Assad regime, the Syrian political makers and diplomats also showed, as they are showed maybe to the United States, to Russia, to China, and to other actors regionally, they want to integrate themselves to this economic and political new tables. Yes, it is the maybe not right time. Just everything is not solved for Syria. Think about this northern Syrian situation. In southern Syria, we have seen many things about Israel's attacks. But now I think Egyptian and Turkish side, as their civilizational, as their historical and political maybe important legacies in the region, also they want to show that Syria can be a good alliance also in this new projection of humanitarian atmosphere, especially in such a region of Middle East.
Mr. Demirtas, do you expect any concrete agreements, whether political or economic, to be announced at the end of Erdogan's Cairo visit?
I think economic sections is so important. Like in the Saudi Arabian stop, we have seen important economic decisions taken between these two countries. Also, if you think that Egyptian and Turkish economies, there are similarities. Of course, we have same problems, same shortages, due to their professional sectors. But still, I think we must have an important alliance, in terms of this economy turmoils and crises, because our region, like in the global atmosphere, has also opened to this economic crisis atmosphere, also like in political case. Now I expect that, as you said, in the economic sector, especially in this goods and services, we can see some important agreements, especially memorandum of understandings, maybe also between these foreign ministries, but also politically about this Gaza and Rafah crossing and all these things. I think these important arguments and articles will be especially highlighted, I think, in the context of this visit.
Melih Demirtas, thank you for your valuable insights. We appreciate your time and expertise. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
That's the news for this hour. Stay tuned to A News for more updates.